Hello again, slot car fans. Today I'm going to be doing a review of this ScaleAuto Box Track Set. I'm looking forward to this one. This is a relatively new product for the Australian market, and I'm interested to see exactly what it's all about. So I'm going to put my cup of tea down and let's get into it. So first things first is obviously going to be unpacking. Packaging is very nice. You know, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, except to say one thing, which is really nice, and that is there's not one of those huge great pieces of polystyrene that you normally get with track sets. In this case, there's a bunch of cardboard boxes which basically contain each of the different component types, like straight sections, curved sections, you know, power supply, hand controllers, etc. The first one I'm going to pull out is the barriers. So yeah, so that's how the packaging is done. I actually quite like that. I don't have a huge great piece of polystyrene that I need to get rid of or find a home for, so I quite like that. So I'm going to unpack everything now, and the next thing we'll do is we'll look at each of the component parts individually. Okay. So here we are on the floor, because that's where I'm going to be putting the layout later, and I've unpacked everything, as you can see. So everything that you would expect to see, straight sections, a power straight, short straight sections, inside curves, outside curves, power supply, and a hand controller. There are two hand controllers in the set, but I've only unpacked one. And the barriers. I'm not going to worry too much about the barriers. In contrast to everything else that's in the set, they look a little bit flimsy. Everything else looks really robust, so I'm not going to worry too much about the barriers. You know, we don't buy sets for the barriers, we buy for the track. And then the next thing I'm going to do is look at each of the individual items in detail. Look at the materials, look at the construction, look at the the design of how it goes together. And then after that, I'll be putting the track together in the configuration that you can see on the box. I guess one question is always going to be, can you make different layouts with the stuff that you actually get in the box as standard? And the answer to that is yes, you can. And I'll probably give that a go if there's enough time in the day. I'll probably give that a go later, and we will get a bit of a view of what the options are to make alternate layouts. Later on, of course, you can always add more track if you want to. You can buy other track components to extend your track, but let's also see if you can make a different layout without extending the amount of track that you have. So yeah, next will be individual items in a bit more detail. So looking at everything that came in the box one by one. First of all, a little bit of documentation. There is an instruction leaflet. I'm not going to call it a manual. I don't think this set is targeted at people who need a manual. It's targeted at people who have a little bit of experience maybe already with other manufacturers' products. And you know, so it's a modular project. It's plug and play, so you should be able to just work it out, put it together, you know, and off you go. So yes, there is the mandatory leaflet. They also give you a brochure showing you other ScaleAuto products. And one of the things that came to my attention pretty quickly when I looked inside the brochure was that this track system is capable of supporting a 12-lane layout. Now, I don't know how you get power to a 12-lane layout and hand controllers, etc., but you know, in theory, it should be able to support a 12-lane layout. The two types of curve that you saw earlier on the floor were the inner and the next, which is let's call them the R1 and the R2 style curve, and you can get up to an R6, so that's 12 lanes, which is awesome, because you know, not many people are going to ever want to put together a 12-lane layout, but to have access to the tight inside curves and to those large sweeping outside curves, you know, for a 2-lane or a 4-lane layout is awesome. Great options to have. Yeah, if I was putting together a ScaleAuto track for myself, I'd be making use of those large radius corners, that's for sure. Yes, so the brochure, informative, and you know, it shows you all the other stuff that ScaleAuto do, and they do a lot, so it's interesting to see it all together in one piece of documentation. Next one. Let's just get this one out of the way, because as you know already, you've heard me say it, this is not my favourite item, but it's always nice to have barriers. These work by clipping onto the side of the track. You've got this clip arrangement here which clips onto the underside of the edge of the track, on the outside edge if you like, and yeah, they work. I've never really liked them. I've seen the same solution with other suppliers and I don't like them because they're the first thing to break. The material has to be soft and pliable because it's going to be mounted on straights. It's all going to be mounted, also going to be mounted on curves, and the clips need to be able to flex a little bit to get them to engage with the track edge. So they're always the first thing to break. But that's not critical of ScaleAuto. Everyone's the same. All the manufacturers are the same. So that's that one. The next one, something I'm really pleased with, is the power supply. The power supply has control on it and a digital readout of the voltage that you have at the time. So that's really good. If you've got, you're having a birthday party for one of your kids and you've got a bunch of his friends come over, you can turn the voltage down to 8 or 9, rather than 12, and the demolition derby that ensues. So you can turn it down for a bit of control. And equally, if you've got other cars that you run yourself and they need a bit more voltage, maybe the motor's tired or it's just a low spec motor, and you've got a fast layout or whatever, you might want to turn the voltage up to 13, 14, depending. So that's a nice little touch. I've not seen that on a home layout before. The other thing I quite like about the power supply is it's got these mounting lugs. So you can actually, screw this down to a baseboard. Or if you want to, you can screw it to a vertical if you want to. If you've got a vertical rather than flat, you can put it onto a vertical. I've not seen that before with a home setup. So yeah, I like that. I'll be interested to see how it performs. The next thing is the hand controller. Like I said, I've only unpacked one of these. There are two. The other one's blue if I remember rightly, but I picked out the yellow one because it's easy to see on the camera. This is quite impressive. This is an analog controller. The whole set is analog. It's capable of being upgraded to digital afterwards if you want, but as supplied it is an analog setup. And what does that mean? Well, it means there's no lane changing, and it means that the only real control you have is the voltage you supply to the car via this trigger. Now, being an analog controller, it's not an expensive item, but it's an item where it's easy to underspec it in such a way that you save a bit of money on it, and I'm really pleased to see that ScaleAuto haven't done that with this one. What you have here is an analog controller that is slightly different in design to most other analog controllers. Most other analog controllers use what's known as a rheostat, which is basically just a piece of resistive wire wound round an insulated core and a wiper arm that engages with different coils depending on where the wiper arm is, and that gives you a different resistance and therefore a different voltage on the power rails on the track that reaches the motor. So what ScaleAuto have done is they've got rid of the rheostat setup, and instead you've got a resistor network there. Can you see those pale blue items? These are all resistors, and they're arranged in such a way that the more the wiper arm moves, you can see the wiper arm down below. You can see there's the wiper arm. The more it moves, the more or less it engages with those resistors, and that's how you get the voltage to be changed on the track. And on the other side, you can see you have these tracks up here that the wiper arm engages with. So there is no wiper arm running across, a wire round a drum or anything like that. This feels very smooth. This feels very nice. It's the nicest analog controller I've ever used, or I haven't used it yet, but it's the nicest motion and everything. So I'm really looking forward to using that. It's got a conventional USB connector. It's not a high current device, so that connector should be absolutely fine. Good job, ScaleAuto. I like that. It's manufactured by DS, which is a subsidiary of ScaleAuto, so it's keeping it in the family, and I think it's a nice touch. I can't get over how nice that actually feels. I feel like I could actually race with that. So nice controller. Next is a couple of the track components. This is the inside one that I mentioned. So this would be lanes 1 and 2 if you were putting a multi-lane track together, but for our purposes these are the only lanes we're going to have. So and then the next one is, you know, the outside. In this context, this would be an outside one. So this is lanes 3 and 4 in a multi-lane environment. Okay, and obviously they work together in a multi-lane setup. We're not going to be doing a multi-lane setup. This is purely a 2-lane track, but these work together in such a way that you just push them together, and then you get obviously 4. You know, you can have a 4-lane track if you want to, as with all other track systems. But one of the things that works really nice here is that on the edge of these tracks there are little lugs, little locating lugs. I wouldn't call them clips. They're not even clips, but they're just little lugs that are so positioned that the 2 bits of track actually do interface with one another. And it's really nice because it means that this join here between the 2 track sections, this join here is almost non-existent. I mean, I can barely feel that as I run my finger across it. I can barely feel it, which is really nice because it makes it look like one surface. And to the cars that are running adjacent to it, it behaves like one surface, and that's really important. So again, we can't look at this one today because the track won't support a 4-lane layout, but it would be nice to see how this actually looks once it's installed, and see if it actually looks as good as it looks here. And you can see that those little lugs, they're taking the weight of this piece of track. Like I say, they're not really clips, they're just little lugs for positioning, but it works really well. And obviously they just, you know, pull apart. Now, you can barely see them, they're really small, but there you go, you can just see them in the on the edge here, tiny little lugs, and they just work together to make that interlocking you know, really effective. Yeah. How do the track pieces join together? Pretty standard, really. You know, just these tongues that you've got here, and they fit into the groove in the opposing piece of track, and you just push. Now you have to push quite firmly because the material used is quite hard plastic, but you have to push quite hard, and it goes together really nicely. So again, you know, you can barely feel that join. You can barely feel. I know you can see it, but trust me, you can barely feel it. The alignment is really good, really, really good. And again, you know, a complaint of other track systems in the past, especially, you know, the older ones, were, you know, that these joins, and, you know, we'd leave gaps, etc. So we'll see what the electrical conductivity is like between the, you know, across the joins. We'll see what that's like later. But physically, that's a nice join. That works really well. And you don't have to click anything in place. It just pushes, and that's it. It's like an interference fit, and that's it. And to pull it apart, you just, you know, literally, you just pull it apart, and that's it. That's as simple as it needs to be. Materials. It's a hard plastic. It's fairly rigid, which is all good as far as I'm concerned. There's a lot of webbing underneath to stop, you know, sagging and warping, which is always a good thing to have with these plastic track systems. The top surface has a texture to it. I would call it medium. It's not particularly coarse, and it's not particularly fine. I've got a feeling it'll work particularly well with sponge tyres. I think sponge tyres will dig into this and get a lot of grip, but we'll see. We'll see later. I've got a couple of cars lined up for that one. There are lugs underneath. You see these lugs here. You can put like a cable, a tie across these adjacent pieces of track in a multi-lane setup, and you can see around the edge. You can see this channel here. That's what the barrier clips into, just as with other track systems. The slot itself is, you know, similar to other track systems. It's got the plastic on the inside face of the slot, which is nice because hopefully that will give us some smoother running. We'll see how that does later, but the signs are looking good. And the rails are capable of magnet traction, so cars that have a magnet will actually respond accordingly with this track. You will get that magnetic effect. I did a bit of a play earlier, and it seems to be quite strong, which again is a feature that you can either make use of or ignore. It's up to you. Again, if you've got kids running on the track, you might want to use magnet cars. For more mature users who want a bit of racing action, you might want to use non-magnet cars. That's up to you. This gives you both options. Yeah, it looks good. It looks good in terms of how it assembles together, and in terms of the feel. You can feel if a product feels flimsy in your hand. This doesn't. It really doesn't. And the last thing I want to say about the track is, if you look at the surfaces on the underside, they all come together in one final plane, which is really quite important when you actually put it on a board, because you want everything to be supported. You don't want the track to sag over time or anything like that. So as much of the track that sits on the board that you've got the track sat on, the flatter it will sit, and the flatter it will stay for longer as well. So yeah, I think that's going to be one of the strong points of this track system, is it will stay flatter for longer, I think. Okay, and the last one I've got here, this is the power straight, but it's also obviously identical in size and layout to a standard straight, but it's got the interface here for the power supply and for the hand controllers. So looking at those, the outside two USB style ports there for the hand controllers, and you've got 3 power inlets here. Now you get one power supply with this set because it's an analog set, and you just plug it into the middle one and off you go. It supplies power for both USB ports and therefore both lanes. But if you wanted to add another power supply, I think the way that it works, and I've not looked into this, but I'm pretty sure this is how it works, you disconnect it from the middle one and you put it into the 2 outer ones, and then one power supply provides power to this USB and the other power supply to this USB. And that's a nice feature because you can run your 2 lanes at different voltages. So if you've got one youngster and one more one user who's a little bit older, you can run at different voltages. So yeah, I don't know how this converts to the digital specification. When you want to do an upgrade, you probably get a different another straight, I would imagine, with different interfaces on it. Yeah, this is an analog only setup, so it's as simple as it can be. Okay, but using standard socketry should make it a lot easier. So there you go. I'm pretty impressed with the build quality on those components, especially the hand controller and the power supply. The track system, the proof of the pudding is in the eating on that one. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put the track together in the standard configuration that you see on the box. Okay. So the track is built. It literally took me 5 minutes to put the track together. It went together extremely easily, and I plugged the power block in, set it to 12 volts, and it worked perfectly first time, which to me is a major plus. So a couple of things I forgot to mention earlier in the video. One is the voltage rating of the power supply. So I've got it set to 12 volts at the moment, but you can run it down to 6 volts and you can run it up to 18 volts, which is a nice range. You can do a lot within that range. So depending on your circumstances, those are the variations that you've got on the power supply. And I have tried it at those voltages, and it does exactly what it says on the indicator on the power supply. Another thing I forgot to mention is the the track dimensions. So the width of the track is exactly 200 millimeters, and the lane spacing, the space between the lanes, is exactly 100 millimeters. So that's nice, because with 1/32 scale cars you need a bit of sideways room for side-by-side racing. So that's a good feature, and equally it means you can also run 1/24 scale cars, which is also very nice. So I've got 3 cars to test here, just with different characteristics, just to see how they go. The first one is a slotted with sponge tyres and no magnet. The next one is a Scale Extric with urethane tyres and a magnet, a fairly strong magnet, has to be said. And the last one is a BRM 1/24 scale, and that is rubber tyres with no magnet. So let's do some laps. I probably won't talk too much because there will be a bit of noise, and I'll talk again at the end. So this is the slotted with sponge tyres and no magnet. I'm not going to go hard. Now, as you can see, the car likes the track. You know, the car is planted, it sits there. It doesn't have a huge amount of grip, but these are not the best tyres in the world, so that's probably as much to do with the car. But you know, if you wanted to add a magnet, you can. You know, you've got that option. You've got other options as well with slotted cars, obviously. So the fact that that car, you know, likes running on the track. It finds it's very smooth. It's very, very smooth. That's a big plus. The next car, urethane tyres with a magnet, and it's quite a strong magnet, so the driving characteristics are going to be very different. There you go. So again, the car is finding no issues. This has got a standard ScaleAuto slot guide in it, and as you saw, it just circulated. It found it absolutely fine. The thing I'm liking about the track system so far is that the track surface is very flat and level, and the cars aren't picking up the fact that there are joins in the track. So it's pretty seamless, which is great. And the last car here, this is the BRM with rubber tyres and no magnet. And you can see, even with a 1/24, you can hang the tail out a bit. So yeah, that's a nice drive. Now, I was expecting one of these cars to have a problem with, you know, just compatibility. No such issues whatsoever. No such issues. So I'm pretty pleased with that. That's a good representation of what people might be running on a track system like this. So I'm going to leave it there, and I'll come back for the final wrap up. So that was a quick track test. I did quite a bit of testing as well. I had a bit of a lunch break, and I did a bit of testing then as well. So I did more running than you actually saw, but with the same results. The track is smooth, it's consistent, and it's actually a pleasure to drive. It almost drives like a wood track in terms of how smooth it is. The joins work really well, and the joins are the be all and end all of these plastic track systems. If the joints don't work, the track doesn't work. Okay, so you need a good physical connection between two adjacent track sections. You need a good electrical connection, and you need you know, a connection or an interface whereby when a slot car runs through that intersection, that it doesn't notice, it doesn't get pinched, it doesn't slow down. It doesn't get thrown out of the slot. You know, it's a consistent, smooth channel for the slot guide to run in all the way through without any change of attitude or speed or anything like that. And in that regard, this track system does that very, very well. So that's a big tick. That's really good. Let's talk about the layout in a bit more detail. So the layout that you saw me testing is the suggested layout on the box, and the question that arises from that is, can you create other layouts with only using the track components that you've got in the box? And the answer is yes. You could probably make a shorter track just by removing some of the track and just running a shorter track. That would be very easy to do. The other option you've got is you can actually move the track sections around and create a completely different layout. Now, I'm not going to do that now. It's a little bit late in the day and I want to get this video posted because I've got some news at the end relating to slot shops reopening. What else about the track layout? In terms of the physical space that it takes up, ScaleAuto's suggestion is 1.2 meters by 2.3. And that means that it fits on a table tennis table or a pool table with a baseboard, obviously, which is great. That's really great. If you've got a rumpus room, in your house, if you've got a playroom, chances are you may also have a table tennis table or or a pool table. So you could just plonk this on top. Really easy. So this is ScaleAuto's smallest set that they do, and I think they've probably configured this in such a way that it does fit on a table tennis table or pool table. I think it's quite a deliberate move and a really good one. It's a smart way to go. They're going to be doing other sets that are slightly larger. Obviously you get a longer lane length then, but you don't have the same economies in terms of the space that it takes up. So how would you extend this particular set? You can extend it in two ways. One is you can extend the lane length by adding more track sections. So you can buy a packet of straights and just add some straights into it, or you can add some buy some corners as well, and you can add more complexity to the layout, giving you a longer lane length. The same as with other track systems. Nothing new there, but that's how you would do it. You would buy additional track sections. The other way you could expand the layout that you see here is that this particular layout will only ever support 2 lanes because of the tight curves that are used. You could only ever use this as a 2-lane setup. But if you chose to use a different layout altogether, you could easily run this as with some additional track components, I should say. You could easily run a 4-lane system or a 6-lane system or an 8-lane system all the way up to 12. I don't think you'd want to go that far, but the option is there. A lot of people run 4-lane systems in their homes, for instance, and this lends itself to that beautifully. It really does. I mentioned the lugs on the edges of the track where they sort of interlock a little bit and they give you that nice consistent flat surface. That's a major plus point, and that would help me to decide on this particular track system if I was going to go and build a track at home, using this track system. I think to myself, yeah, those interlocking lugs, I like that. That gives me a nice smooth surface that I can rely on. So, yeah, as with all of these plastic track systems, it's very extensible. You can, really scale it, lengthways and track widthways as well. So yeah. So that's the track dimensions. I mentioned the joins. I'm going to mention it again because it's the lifeblood of these track systems. If they don't work, the track doesn't work. So, I put this track together and it worked first time, which is exactly what you want. It's exactly, you don't want trouble, having to troubleshoot anything like that just by, when you first get it out of the box. You don't want to be troubleshooting it at all. You want to be able to pull this track apart, put it back together again in a different layout. You want to be able to do that time and time again without having to worry about the electrical connectivity. Now, I haven't done 100 teardowns and rebuilds. I haven't done that. I've only just put it together once, so I can't give you any information on how well it's going to endure over time. But looking at the quality of the materials and the components, etc., I think it's going to be pretty robust. That would be my sort of opinion on that one. Next, let's just talk about a couple of things where I don't think this particular track system would necessarily excel. I think there are possibilities, but I don't think that would be something that this track system would excel at. and it's down to the rigidity of the track sections. If you remember when we looked at the track individually, the individual components, the track components, and I mentioned how rigid they are, that they don't bend and they don't twist, which is a major plus point, clearly, and I would rather have it that way. But what it means is if you want to do banking, I don't think this particular track system would lend itself particularly well to banking, because it's more rigid than that. And like I say, I would take the rigidity every time. I really would. Perhaps some of the larger radius corners would lend themselves to banking a little bit more, because you've got longer track length, and therefore more opportunity for getting a bit of banking on the go. But the short tight corners, you're not going to get those to give you any decent banking at all. And in a similar vein, if you want to run a figure of 8 track, and a lot of people do because they like the equal lane length that gives you, if you want to run a figure of 8, you need a bridge. And for the same reason, the rigidity of the individual track sections, you're not going to get very smooth transitions between in the joins. So if you imagine you've got the start, you've got the incline, you've got the flat section over the top, you've got the decline, and then you go back to going on the level again. I think you're not going to get smooth transitions at the joins. You're going to get angular transitions like that. You're not going to get smooth, graduated. You're going to get angular. So you're going to get that ski ramp effect. I think you can overcome it if you plan ahead, and if you give yourself a long run up and a long roll down again. You've got more track sections that you're playing with, and those intersections, those connections are going to be not so pronounced because there's more of them. So yeah, if you plan it, if you want a bridge, plan it and give yourself a long run up, and you'll be fine. And keep the bridge as low as you possibly can as well. That's the other tip I would give on that one. Yeah, so that's it. That's the review. At every turn, I've not found anything that I can really complain about. The power supply is great. That variable voltage feature, that's really good. I've not seen that in a home track system before, and I like that a lot. Especially if you've got young kids, you can give them a bit more control. The hand controllers, they're great. They are really nice analog hand controllers. If I was running the home track system, I wouldn't feel the need to get my race controller out and run that. I'd be quite happy to run these controllers for a few months before I got my proper race controllers wired in. These are fine. They're very nice controllers, very nice. So yeah, I'm struggling really to find anything to be very critical of. Like I say, I think there's a couple of weaknesses that come about as a result of other strengths, being more overriding, so that the rigidity of the track, that the plastic they use, and the molding and the design and everything, the strength of the track means that you can't run banking as easily. You can't do a bridge as easily. You can still do them if you plan them properly, but it take a little bit more thought to achieve. But that's about as far as I can go in terms of being, offering any sort of criticism of the product at all. If I was to be building a track at home, and I didn't want to go to the complexity of building my own wood track, and I had to come back a step, I'd either be looking at a modular track system, something more in the commercial space, modular type track system. If I was looking at a plastic track system, I think this would be the one. You've got those 12-lane R6 turns, as I called them. They're a great option for some high-speed action on a home track. You've got the tight turns, which you need for twisty-turny layouts. So you've got lots and lots of options in terms of the layouts that you can build with this track system. And it drives like a wood track. It drives very, very smoothly. So yeah, I'm impressed. I'm impressed. I've got no hesitation in recommending it. It's available across Australia now. I know Slot Shop have got a few of these in stock. And let's talk about what's going to happen to this track. So this track is now going to go back in the box. I promise I will do a good job, and I need to do a good job because this very track system is going to be raffled off by Slot Shop. And in order to buy a ticket for the raffle, you need to attend the opening day, which is this Saturday the 20th. And you can buy raffle ticket to win this particular track system. So yeah, please, if you're in the area, if you've been to Slot Shop at Rockdale before, then please come along to the new shop in Panania, number 144 Tower Street in Panania. Come along, buy yourself a raffle ticket, buy yourself a couple of cars, and then, you know, if you win, you've got a track system and a couple of new cars to put on it. If you don't win, you've still got a couple of cars. So yeah, give that a go. I'll be there all day. Really looking forward to the opening, and it'll be good to see the track go to a worthy home. So I'm going to sign off there. The only thing that remains for me to say is a cookie, obviously. You know the drill by now, if you get this far on these videos. And the people who know me, they'll be wondering why this one hasn't appeared already. So again, it's not going to be a car video. It's not going to be it's not going to be car themed. It's not going to be race themed. It's going to be one of my all-time favourite films, and it's one that ScaleAuto have picked up on. And it's the Blues Brothers. Not the Blues Brothers 2000, which was the very poor sequel, but the original from the 80s. What a film. Brilliant car chase actually there's more than one car chase, but brilliant car chases, lots of irreverent humour, and a soundtrack that is off the scale. I never get tired of watching it, and you know, I've got the soundtrack on my phone. I often listen to the music. It's awesome. So yeah, that's one for you to watch at your leisure. Enjoy, and until the next one, please, be kind to somebody today. Okay, thank you. Bye now.